Hi everybody, it's Tuesday, so day 2 of this workshop. Yesterday you got your assignment to pick your topic first, either a person or a place, and then gather your items and start looking through them, organizing, deciding what you want to work with. Hi everybody. So, now that we've started with the assignment, got your topic, hopefully you've gathered your things. If not, you still have plenty of time. The instructions and everything are up on our Instagram page here. So I'm going to basically walk you through this piece right here. This is a piece that I made while I was at Roanoke College teaching some workshops at Olin Hall and Fintel Library. And I gathered some materials from Fintel and went through them, organized them, and was going to make a piece with them that has now been acquired by Olin Hall, and will be there after all of this is over with our current situation. So I'm going to walk through step by step how I went about organizing this piece, putting it together, and how you can basically apply some of those ideas to the project that we're in right now. So just to start with, again, just like with this, I had to decide what my topic was, what my theme was going to be, and my theme is Roanoke College, thinking about, I was at Fintel, at Olin Hall, how all this kind of comes together, what my experience was while I was there. One of the things that kind of stood out to me was some of the materials that I got first. So here's my stack of materials. Got book covers, end papers with writing, other slight damage and such, end papers, various card catalog pieces, book pages, etc. And so I kind of organized them into different types of material, different colors, etc., kind of to see like what I had. So in this piece you've got some book covers here, the reverse on the other side, being able to see some of the damage. We've got notes that people have put in the margins of books, covers of pamphlets, etc. And so I just kind of organized all those and got ready. Then I had to decide, well, what am I going to do with all these materials? So thinking about my theme of Roanoke College and the buildings, and that whole area is all interconnected with various pathways and such, and the stonework in those pathways seemed to keep on popping up in my memory. So before I left, I took these charcoal rubbings of the actual pathway, and then now that I had these as reference points, could get the exact size, etc., I went ahead and made templates for each of those. So I've got square piece, got our shapes, and then I used a book repair spacer for the spacing of the grout, and everything kind of fits. So I would kind of pick the materials based on how big it was, how small it was, what colors and stuff I had, and I went ahead and cut them into these shapes. If you end up making a template, just so I can show you how I made mine, it's just a series of board that I've put together. A lot of the work that I make is on this archival 20 or 40 point enclosure board that we use in order to, if let's say there's a damaged book or a book that's falling apart that still is going to be out and about in a library setting, then you build like an enclosure for it so it can kind of stay safe on the shelf. So I'm using the same materials. You could do this with paper or cardstock or anything else. But got my basic shape, and then I took multiple sheets of this and I overlapped them at different parts of the grain, so it wouldn't all just be in one section and fold into one another and not be able to lay flat like I want it to. But gluing them multiple times on top of each other, cleaning up the edges, etc., give me just enough of that lip so I can just cut the same shape over and over and over again. So I've got my 3 templates. I've based all of that off of the exact specifications of the pathway, and then I went about, cut everything out. I use an alpha blade. I just find that they're the easiest to work with for a lot of the stuff that I use, unless I'm using something with small titanium scissors like I showed you yesterday. But everything that I cut on this particular piece was all with an alpha blade. You can do it with a box cutter or an X-Acto knife or whatever you may want to use. But went ahead and cut out all my shapes, and then had a large piece of the board, the 20-point board that I was talking about before, and just laid everything out a bunch of different ways. Just sat with it for little bits of time, walked away, came back, kind of decided like what was working, how I could space the colors, etc., etc. But then I didn't quite love the color of the board, so it's hard to see from this distance, but you'll see us marbling all through this piece. And the way that I did that marbling was I took a very soft graphite pencil. This is an 8B, really easy to move across a page, and I just went all over the board with this to give it that marbled background. And when you're just rubbing it, it ends up looking like pencil marks. So one way that you can move it around is using your fingers, but of course you're just releasing that oil and putting it into the board. So if you take a dryer sheet and just open up the dryer sheet, rub it out, make that marbled effect, add graphite as you need it, spread it all out. That's what I did to kind of change the texture of my background. And then I laid everything out, glued everything down. Again, I always use this water-based PVA. It's book binding glue. I put it in a small container. You can see all the layers of nastiness in there. I pull it out like every couple of months, kind of makes a mold. But glue my backs, get everything situated. Everything's being spaced with the spacer, and by the time that first layer was finished, I had this big board that basically looked like a 70s showroom linoleum floor, which at first felt really unfortunate. I was like, I've already ruined this piece. I don't love the way that it looks. I like what some of the colors are doing, but I don't love it in its current state. So then I was thinking more about the research that I put in ahead of time. When I asked you to think about your topic and then finding the items and thinking about how they're related, I was kind of thinking about that connection between the university, the pathways, the library, the gallery, etc., looking into that historical past, the connection of the funding for both of those buildings, the way that the whole university is laid out around various quads. And so I thought, well, what this pathway is connecting is these two buildings. What these buildings are a part of is this larger institution. And so I went back and cut the piece that I made before, which was much larger than this, into sections. And then I cut those sections into smaller sections, all of them looking just like this. It's 1 inch by 4 inch, these little strips. And so you can see in some of these, you're getting some of the angles from here. You're seeing some of the ways that pieces drop in and out of one another. So you still get the movement of the path, but it's less obvious. And I've taken those strips, built them into little blocks or quads and combined the quads together in order to find this one in the middle, surrounded by these outside areas. There's some building imagery, some hillside imagery and stuff from these, I think they were almanacs from Salem at some point in the 70s. But so I kind of spread out some of those images, again, to give you that spacing, that sense of place, and reconnecting some of these ideas together to make a new pattern, something that's more personal to my experience there and my experience with these materials and the process, etc. So again, once I had these strips, I would go ahead and make all of these as tight as humanly possible individually into these sets of 4. Instead of just going ahead and gluing everything together, the problem with having pieces coming together in a collage is doesn't always fit exactly, even if you think that you've cut everything perfectly. So I would glue each of these to a thin piece of paper and then make sure that they were perfectly square, and then glue those together onto another backing board. So by the time all of this was finally put together, you've got 3-4 layers of paper in all these different sections, reinforcing everything, making it nice and thick, nice and heavy. And then the end result is this piece, quadrangle path, or quadrangle pathways, I think is what I ended up with. But I keep lots of notes. I'll write down, what shape I'm going to end up being, where I want different colors, how many of each colors that I have, because you don't want just like a big splotch of blue here, unless that's your intent. But I like to try and spread out what I have, move the eye around, make it as appealing as possible. So knowing how many of each material that I have is really important. Cataloging everything, separating everything, getting as set up as possible so when I actually dive into it, I'm getting where I want to go. But the thing about that is mistakes are always going to happen, and mistakes are kind of the magic that happens in the studio in a weird way. The things that you don't expect, the things that force you to make some sort of change or alter your original plan actually makes the piece better almost always. And if it's not better, it at least teaches you something that you can avoid in the future. So, like for instance, there were a couple of strips where once I put them down, I had like a big glob of glue. It got all into the graphite. It looked awful. And I'd have to be like, I've got to reconfigure that area. Do I have another piece of this color? Or, if I can take that one section out, do I have another thing that I can complement it with somewhere else? So, that's a basic run through of how I ended up making this piece. I'm going to see... Let's see, do you have any tips for gluing large pieces onto board or thicker paper? I try to get things into as small pieces as humanly possible and kind of build them up, again, with that multi-layering. If I want it to be strong, putting it on the board. If I just need it to be temporary, finding like a piece of notebook paper or something really thin in order to put that. And then lay section out. I usually try to start from a corner or from the center, depending on, what my final product is going to look like. I use, let's see, do I have my bone folder somewhere? Anyway, I use a bone folder to push everything out. I try to get one section of something down and then just slowly lay it out, letting, going from the outside in to the final corners. Let me see if I can find that. Give me 1 second. So for me, I use this. Say I want to glue this piece to this. I would probably line it up to an edge, because a lot of my stuff is working into angles. Putting it down just here, and then you're still going to have this looseness. You've got your glue, and I'll work that edge back and forth, move forward, move out, slowly going farther and farther away from my original point, keeping all those bubbles out, and trying not to overcommit either, because if you just go ahead and push everything down, you're bound to get that bubble. So having that play, so by the time you get there, you can keep on keeping it flat. You're going to get a little bit of glue that comes out of the edge. What I do with the bone folder is once I see that little glop coming up, I'll just take the edge, move it across, put it on my wrist, clean it up, run the edge with my finger, flick off the glue. Kind of dries instantly on your fingers. You can ball it up, push it off, keep your hands clean, and just keep on moving. If you have a really big piece, having an extra hand is really nice. Say you've got like a 20-inch piece of paper that you've already worked on. You need something on the back. Again, working from a single corner, but having that extra hands to keep those edges up so you don't just like plop it down and hope for the best. Does anyone else have any questions or anything, or discovered any interesting things to work from? Again, if you haven't started the project, no problem. You can keep on working with us. I'll be here every day at 3 this week. Tomorrow I'm going to just live stream me making the collage for this project. I don't know how far I'll get, or I've started a little bit, but we'll just see what happens, and y'all can make your collages along with me, ask me questions, etc. I really hope that as you make things that you show it or share it with us. Either send it to Olin Hall's Instagram or mine, or get in touch with us. We'd love to see it. Love for you to share what we're making in isolation, maybe the stories behind it. Thinking of that place, thinking of that person, finding those items. How is it connected? Like if you find yourself spending a lot of time in the kitchen, for instance, going into your kitchen and finding boxes and scraps of paper and just all the different things that you're eating during quarantine, and putting those together into some way. You can think before you start your collage. A lot of the times, when we think collage, we're thinking about cutouts from magazines and altering those things to make mutant representations of things that we already have. But you could also just think of is there a pattern in the room? Is there a pattern that a person is wearing all the time? Is there a symbol or an image, or you could do a silhouette of a person. You could you have so many different options, so many different directions that you can go in. Slowly take those pieces together and structure them together. Does anyone else have any questions or anything like that? I feel like I kind of blasted through how I made this, but I think I pretty much covered the basics of it. Hopefully it gave you a much better idea of the thought and the process that went behind making this work. In general, I do this for every piece that I work on. Kind of struggling with the materials, struggling with the ideas, altering some of the approaches that I take, and not letting go until I'm happy with something. If you don't feel 100% about something and putting it out into the world, you can have some regrets and whatnot. It's good to just kind of sit and be able to process things. There are things that I've hated at 2 in the morning when I've walked out out of this room and been like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix this. And then I've come back the next morning and I just realized I'm tired and all the work that I put in, like, this is great. I don't have to do anything to it. And I've had the opposite happen too, where it's like, I've made a piece and I just don't know what to do with it. And then I'll set it aside for, a month or two, come back to it, and I know exactly what needs to happen. Please take your time with your collages. Again, I feel like collage is often thought of as a, kind of instant, sloppy process, but it can, be really involved and complicated and personal and tell a story in a non-conventional way. I feel like this is a semi-narrative piece, combination of communal and personal experiences and history and place and all that stuff. There are things that you can embed into your work that'll just make it more fulfilling both for you and the audience. So let's see. So did you as an artist overlap your papers? Yes, I guess depends on what you mean by overlapping papers, but I try to decide what type of texture that I want on a piece. Do I want there to be, a depth of field? Do I want there to be different layers that are visible? Or do I want everything to be perfectly flat? It really depends on the piece. I work on these large pieces with triangles cut out of LP covers, and in order to get the images and textures and everything that I want, they have to overlap multiple ways and do this series of layering. But then other pieces, I need everything to be exactly fitted and flat. Don't want those too many extra bumps, too much exposure or whatever, if I'm trying to just have that nice flat. A lot of things that I use have been discarded, some of them damaged and whatnot, so figuring out a way what's the best way to deal with this material in order for it to still stay archival, to not rapidly fade or deteriorate. Working with papers and fabrics and other things like that can be complicated when it comes to that, because you can make something with a whole bunch of things, but if you want it to last long and look the way that it did when it left the studio, sometimes there's a lot of extra questions that need to be asked and answered before you can move ahead. I hope that answered your question. Yeah, does anyone else have anything? Has anyone found anything cool to work with? Or picked an interesting topic? Like I said, tomorrow, I'll probably just live stream me working. But I can do, I'm here all week. If there are things that y'all want to know about, my practice, or, if you have specific questions about the work that you're doing, yeah, I'm absolutely available. Would love to be in touch. I'm working on a couple large pieces right now. Once we get past this class, I'll be posting a lot of process work and updates on some of these new works that I'm making, so that'll be available as well. Yeah. If anyone has any questions about supplies, techniques, whatever it is, please get in touch, and document as you go along. I'm as interested personally in the process behind the piece as I am the final piece. So, documenting your ideas, your thoughts, sharing your experience of being at this point in history and, stuck in our houses and finding new ways to, be creative and utilize this time. There's a lot of horrible things about this, but it's also can be a blessing in some ways because it gives us time for things that we don't normally have extensive time for. So yeah, I'm glad that y'all are spending your time with me and making some stuff. And again, these pieces can be submitted to Curator Off Duty, which goes up January 2022 at Olin Hall Galleries. Just make sure that your collage stays within that 12 inches or smaller. Yeah. Well, if anyone has any other questions, please get back in touch. Maybe I'll give you a zoom up of this piece since it's been so far away. Of course, this whole thing is just very awkward with a phone in a small room, all by yourself. But thank you very much, and yeah, please stay in touch and have fun making. Happy making, everybody. See you tomorrow at 3 o'clock.